He didn't even say goodbye. He just pointed a trembling finger at me, his voice slurred with whiskey. "She's strong. She'll work hard." The stranger counted out the cash. My father sold me, his own 10-year-old daughter. That night, I was taken from my home, and I wouldn't know freedom again for a very, very long time. Hello, my dear. My name is Grace, and today, I am 72 years young. It is such a blessing to be here and share my heart with you from my peaceful little home here in Madison, Indiana. This old lady is always curious. I wonder, where are you all listening from? From a bustling city or a quiet countryside? Wherever you are, I hope you're finding a moment of peace. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from, so I can feel like we're all gathered together here. Because the story I am about to tell you today is not about the peace I have now, but about the fire I had to walk through to get here. I was born in Vevey, right near the Ohio River, in rural Indiana. It was a peaceful little town, where everyone knew each other and news traveled faster than the river's current. Our house was simple, made of worn wood with a tin roof, but my mother, Susan, kept everything so tidy it seemed like a palace. She was a strong woman, with rough hands from so much work, but with a smile that lit up the whole world. My father, Walter, worked as a fisherman on the Ohio River and sold the fish at the town market. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that shook the walls, but he had eyes that changed like the weather. We were a big family. Besides me, the youngest, I had my 4 older siblings, David, the eldest, who helped Dad with the fishing from a young age. Then came Mary, who had a special way with plants. Peter, who was quiet and always had his head in the books the teacher lent him. And Abigail, who was about 3 years older than me and was my constant companion. Our house was in the most remote part of Vevey, almost on the riverbank. It was a small house, but the yard was enormous. We had apple trees, pear trees, and berry bushes, and even some chickens that Mom raised. The ground was just dirt, and when it rained, it made mud that we used to make little dolls. The walls were made of simple plasterboard, patched up in places. Our kitchen had a wood-burning stove that Mom lit early in the morning. The smell of coffee brewing in the old percolator filled the whole house. We didn't have a bathroom inside, no. It was an outhouse way in the back of the yard, and when it rained, it was a misery just to go out there. We bathed with water from the well, which Dad pulled up with a rope and bucket. In winter, that water was so cold it made your whole body shiver, but we didn't even care. It was all very natural for us. My childhood, until I was 8, was like any other country kids at that time. I'd wake up with the roosters crow, help Mom sweep the yard and feed the chickens. Then I'd go to school, which was just one small room where the teacher, Mrs. Baker, taught all the children together, no matter their age. I still remember the smell of chalk and the old primer we used to learn our first letters. After school, it was time to play. We invented so many games. We had spinning tops, marbles, tag, hide and seek, and my favorite, which was jumping rope. Abigail always sang, teddy bear, turn around. Teddy bear, touch the ground. And we would jump until we couldn't anymore. We also played house under the apple tree, where the fallen leaves became our carpet and the low branches, our walls. My friends were the neighbors' kids. There was Emily, who was my age, Tyler, who was a bit older and knew how to make a slingshot better than any boy, and Sophie, who was the liveliest of all and always invented the most fun games. We ran barefoot on those dirt roads, fell, got scratched, but we got up and kept playing as if nothing had happened. At night, after Dad got back from fishing and Mom finished cleaning the kitchen, we would sit in front of the house to listen to the stories Grandma Ruth told. They were stories about Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, and local ghost stories, she said, haunted the woods of Indiana. We listened with wide eyes, scared and fascinated at the same time. On weekends, the whole family went to church. It was the only brick building in the area, all white, with a cross on top that shone when the sun hit it. Mom would put on her only good dress, a navy blue one with little white flowers, and fixed my hair with colorful ribbons. After the service, it was market day. Dad sold the fish he had caught during the week, and Mom took the chance to buy what we needed: flour, beans, a little salt pork when we could afford it. The Vevey market was a feast for my childhood eyes. It had everything: fruits, vegetables, salt, pork, molasses, candy, handicrafts, herbs for home remedies, and even some little wooden toys that we drooled over but couldn't always buy. The smell of spices mixed with fresh fish and ripe fruit. The vendors shouted, announcing their products, and the buyers haggled hard. It was around that time, when I was about 8, that things started to change. First, they were small changes, so small you could barely notice. Dad started coming home later from fishing, sometimes smelling of whiskey. When he arrived like that, it was better to stay very quiet, because any noise irritated him. Mom would lower her head and send us to bed early on those days. Then, the shouting started. My siblings and I would huddle under the blanket, listening to Dad yell at Mom for any reason. "The food is cold. The house is a mess. You're spending too much." His voice, which used to laugh and shake the walls, now shook them in a different way. I remember one night in particular. The rain was falling hard outside, and the sound of the drops on the tin roof almost muffled Mom's sobs. Almost, but not completely. She had a wet cloth on her face, and when she took it away, I saw a purple bruise under her eye. "It was an accident," she said. I slipped and hit the door. But her eyes told another story. Around that same time, my older siblings started leaving home one by one. First, it was David, who found work in Indianapolis and only came back every once in a while. Then, Mary, who married a boy from a neighboring town. Peter went to study in the state capital with the help of a teacher who saw potential in him. Only Abigail was left, who would soon find a job as a maid in a house right there in Vevey. And that's when the world really started to fall apart. One morning we woke up with Mom feeling terrible, with a fever that just wouldn't break. The town doctor came to see her and said it was typhoid, a disease that was spreading through the region because of contaminated water. For 2 months, Mom fought the illness. We children took turns giving her medicine, changing the damp cloths on her forehead, and making food she could barely swallow. On a stormy night, just like the one when I first saw the bruise on her face, Mom called me and Abigail close to the bed. With a weak voice, almost a whisper, she said, "Take care of each other. Be strong, and remember that a mother's love never ends, even when the mother isn't here anymore." In the early hours of that morning, while the wind howled outside, my mother Susan left this world, leaving an emptiness that would never be filled. And so, at 10 years old, I found myself without my mother's warm, protective hug, having to face a world that, as I would soon discover, could be much scarier than the ghost stories Grandma Ruth told. Oh, my dears, when that light goes out, losing your mother that young, it's like they take away your only shield. You feel the cold, the darkness creeping in, and you just know you're not safe anymore. After Mom passed, the house felt different. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning was replaced by a heavy silence. The flowers in the garden she tended so carefully began to wilt. It was as if the soul of our little house had left with her. For a few weeks, Dad was quieter. He didn't shout, didn't drink, just stared into space with those empty eyes. Abigail, at 13, tried to take on the role of the woman of the house, but she was still just a girl too. I tried to help however I could, washing the pots, sweeping the floor, feeding the chickens, but nothing was like before. It was on a market Saturday that I noticed the first change. Dad came home earlier than usual, carrying a bag of food, something he never used to do. "I found a way for us to have a better life," he said, putting a piece of meat on the table that we hadn't seen in a long time. Abigail and I looked at each other, not quite understanding. That same day, after dinner, he called Abigail for a private talk. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to clean the pots, but straining my ears to try and listen. I only managed to catch a few stray words. Respectable family, opportunity, maid, good pay. When Abigail came back, her eyes were teary, but she had a faint smile on her lips. "I'm going to work at Mr. Thompson's house," she told me later, when we were lying on our straw mattress, sharing the same mended blanket. "Dad said it's a chance to learn to be a proper young lady and still earn a little money to help at home." 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, I saw my sister leaving with a small bundle of clothes under her arm. Dad walked her to this Mr. Thompson's house, which was in the rich part of Vevey, where the houses had glass windows and iron gates. I ran after them for part of the way, but Dad told me to go back home. I only had time to hug Abigail and promise that I would visit her every Sunday. And so I was left, alone with Dad in that house, which felt bigger and quieter every day. In the beginning, he still went fishing every day, and I took care of the house, as I had learned from Mom, but soon the routine changed. Dad started skipping fishing, saying he was tired or the weather wasn't good. He went more and more to Mr. Henderson's tavern, where men gathered to drink whiskey and play cards. When he returned, late at night, he would stumble down the path and yell for hot food. If there wasn't any, it was my fault. "You're useless, can't even do that right," he'd bellow, slamming his hand on the table. I trembled like a leaf, but I didn't cry in front of him. I cried later, hidden under the blanket, hugging the pillow that still held a little of Mom's scent. The following Sunday, as promised, I went to visit Abigail, but when I got to Mr. Thompson's big house, his wife, Mrs. Thompson, a thin woman with a pinched nose, told me that Abigail was too busy to receive visitors. "Come back another day," she said, closing the gate in my face. I went back the next Sunday, and the next, always getting the same answer, until one day, Mrs. Thompson didn't even open the gate, just shouted from inside the house. "I already told you she can't have visitors. Don't come back." 3 months passed without any news of my sister. 3 months in which the situation at home only got worse. The money from fishing, which was already little, became rarer and rarer. The bills started piling up. The rice ran out, then the beans. I went for days eating just flour with a little salt. It was on one of those nights when my stomach was rumbling so much I couldn't sleep that I heard the front door open. It was very late, and I thought it was Dad coming back from the tavern, but I heard different voices, men I didn't know. I stayed quiet in my bed, my heart pounding. "So, this is where you live, Walter?" asked a rough voice. "Humble place, huh?" "It's what I can afford," Dad replied, his voice slurred like when he was drunk. "But come in, come in." The men entered the living room, which was only separated from the bedroom by an old curtain. There were 3 of them besides my father. Through a small hole in the curtain, I could see they all had glasses in their hands. "And where is this daughter you talk so much about?" asked another man, shorter and pot-bellied. "I'm curious to meet her." "Grace, come here," Dad yelled. My whole body froze. I didn't want to leave that bed, but I knew it was worse to disobey. I put on my only decent dress, which was already too short, and stepped out from behind the curtain. 4 pairs of eyes stared me up and down, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Is this her?" asked the third man, older than the others, with graying temples. "But she's just a girl. She'll be 11 next month," Dad replied, putting his hand on my shoulder hard. "But she already knows how to cook, wash, iron, does all the housework." That's when I understood what was happening. Like Abigail, I was also being offered up to work as a maid. I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief at leaving that house that now only brought sad memories. Fear of not knowing what awaited me. "Well," said the pot-bellied man, scratching his chin, "my wife has been needing help with the little ones. How much are you asking, Walter?" It was like a bucket of cold water had been dumped on me. Dad wasn't just arranging a job for me. He was selling me. "For you, my friend, I'll do it for $300. It's a bargain, considering she'll work forever, and you don't need to pay wages, just food and a corner to sleep." The men started haggling over prices, as if I were a chicken at the market. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I thought about Abigail, about what might have happened to her. Had she also been sold like this? Or was she really working as a maid, receiving a salary, like Dad said? $500 and she comes with me tonight," said the older man, pulling a wad of cash from his pocket. "My farm in New Albany needs another hand in the kitchen." "Done," replied Dad, grabbing the money eagerly. "Go get your things, girl. You're going with Mr. Harrison now." With trembling legs, I went back to the room and gathered the little I had. 2 changes of clothes, a broken comb, and a holy card of the Virgin Mary that Mom had given me. I put everything in a burlap sack and went back to the living room. "All right, you can take her," Dad said, already stuffing the money into his pants pocket. Not a hug, not a kind word, just a light push on my back towards the door. Mr. Harrison led me to an old truck waiting outside. "Get in the back," he ordered, pointing to the flatbed, where there were sacks of flour and other supplies. I obeyed in silence, sitting on one of the sacks, hugging my little bundle to my chest. As the truck pulled away, I looked back one last time. Dad was in the doorway, counting the money by the light of the lantern. He didn't look at me, didn't wave, didn't show any sign that he was sending his last daughter away. $500. All my life, that image has never truly left me. You know, the worst part wasn't being sold, it was realizing I wasn't worth even a look back. Right then, I knew I was truly an orphan, even with my father still standing right there. At that moment, I knew I was alone in the world. The trip to New Albany lasted all night. Huddled between the sacks, bouncing with the jolts of the truck on the dirt roads, I tried not to think about what awaited me. I tried to remember the stories Grandma Ruth told, the games with Abigail, Mom's smile, but the fear was stronger than the memories. When we arrived, it was already dawning. Mr. Harrison's farm was enormous, with a main house of 2 stories, white with blue windows, and several smaller buildings scattered around. I was taken directly to the kitchen, where an older black woman, with gray hair and calloused hands, received me with a look of pity. "This is Grace," said Mr. Harrison. "Teach her the ropes, Martha, and remember, I don't want to see anyone idle around here." Martha nodded and waited for him to leave before approaching me. "How old are you, child?" she asked in a surprisingly gentle voice. "I'm 10, I replied, "but I'll be 11 next month." I clutched my bundle tighter, as if it could protect me. She sighed deeply. "Oh, dear Lord, another child," when she said, "another child." I heard the weariness in her voice. But my dears, I also heard the pity, the kindness. Martha, God rest her soul. She was my first warm light in that awful place. She saw me when I was nothing but a shadow. Her eyes met mine, and I saw in them a mixture of sadness and determination. "Listen closely, child. Things aren't easy here on the boss's farm, but I'll do what I can to protect you. Just do as I say, and don't talk back when the masters speak to you. Understand?" I nodded, feeling a little bit of hope for the first time since I'd gotten in that truck. At least here, there was someone who seemed to care. But that hope didn't last long. The next morning, I discovered what it really meant to be a servant on Mr. Harrison's farm. The sun hadn't even risen when Martha woke me that first morning on the farm. She shook me gently, put a finger to her lips, asking for silence, and pointed to a faded dress she had left at the foot of the pallet where I slept. "Put this on and come with me," she whispered. The dress was way too big, but I tied the waist with a piece of rope and followed Martha to the kitchen. It was a large room with a huge wood-burning stove, a long, dark wooden table in the center, and shelves full of pots of all sizes. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and burning wood reminded me of home, and for a moment I felt a lump in my throat. "Here," Martha said, handing me a heavy grinder. "Grind these coffee beans while I prepare the master's breakfast." I sat on a low stool and started to work. The grinder was heavy for my thin arms, and soon my hands started to burn. But I kept going, watching Martha move around the kitchen with the agility of someone who knows every corner. She kneaded bread dough, cut fruit, beat eggs, and still found time to shoot me encouraging glances. When the sun finally came up, the kitchen table was already set for the farm workers, and a tray with the master's breakfast was waiting to be taken to the main house. Martha gave me a piece of bread and a cup of coffee with milk. "Eat quickly," she said. "Afterward, you have to wash all the dishes." I had barely finished eating when the kitchen door opened and a tall woman with blonde hair pulled into a tight bun entered. It was Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison's wife. Her blue eyes examined me from head to toe with coldness. "So you're the new servant," she said with an accent that betrayed her foreign origin. "Martha, after she's done here, send her to the main house. I want to see if she's good for anything besides the kitchen." After she left, Martha approached me. "Be careful with Mrs. Harrison," she whispered. "She has no patience for anyone, much less children." When I finished washing the mountain of dishes, my hands wrinkled from being in the water so long, Martha gave me instructions on how to get to the main house. "Don't look the masters directly in the eye. Don't speak unless you're asked something. And don't touch anything without permission," she advised. The main house was a different world from the kitchen. The floors were tiled, The walls had wallpaper with flower designs, and the furniture was made of carved wood that shined as if it had just been polished. I found Mrs. Harrison in the living room, sitting in an embroidered armchair, flipping through a magazine. "Ah, finally," she said, closing the magazine. "Come here." I approached, keeping my eyes down, as Martha had taught. "Look at me," she ordered. When I raised my eyes, she gripped my chin with thin, cold fingers. At least you look clean. Can you read?" "A little, ma'am," I replied, remembering Mrs. Baker's lessons. "Excellent. You will clean the library. Each book must be taken from the shelf, dusted, and put back in the exact same place. Understood?" I spent the entire day in the library, climbing up and down a wooden ladder, taking dusty books from the high shelves. Many had titles in languages I didn't know, with leather covers that smelled of must and thyme. My arms ached, my stomach rumbled with hunger, but I didn't dare stop for even a minute. When I finally finished, it was almost night. I returned to the kitchen exhausted, hoping I could eat something. Martha served me a plate of beans and cornbread and a small piece of bacon. "How did it go?" she asked as I devoured the food. "Tiring," I replied, "but I think the mistress was satisfied." Martha shook her head. "Don't fool yourself, child. No one here is ever satisfied." And she was right. In the days that followed, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, there was always something wrong. If I washed the floor, it wasn't shining enough. If I made the beds, the sheets weren't tucked perfectly. If I helped in the kitchen, I was too slow or too clumsy. The chores were endless. I woke up before the sun to help with breakfast. Then I cleaned the main house, washed clothes, starched sheets, scoured pots, weeded the garden, fed the chickens, and any other job that needed to be done. At night, I collapsed onto the pallet in the kitchen, so tired I could barely think. But the worst part wasn't the work itself, it was the treatment. To the masters, I was invisible until I did something wrong. Then, suddenly, I existed, but only to receive scoldings and, sometimes, even slaps on the hands or ear-pulling. Mr. Harrison rarely appeared in the kitchen, but when he did, his small, dark eyes followed me around the room, making me uncomfortable. He was a big man, broad-shouldered with thick hands, and a voice that made the walls tremble when he was angry. He was the one who gave me my first beating, 2 weeks after my arrival. I was carrying a tray with dinner to the dining room when I tripped on the rug and dropped a platter of rice. The sound of the china breaking was followed by a deadly silence. "You clumsy oaf!" roared Mr. Harrison, standing up from the table. "Do you know how much that china costs?" Before I could answer, he grabbed a thin switch that hung on the wall. I had never understood what it was for until that moment. The blows on my legs and back burned like fire, but I learned that day not to cry in front of the masters. Tears only made them angrier. Later in the kitchen, Martha applied an herbal salve to the red marks the switch had left. "You need to be more careful," she said, but her voice was kind. "He has no pity for anyone." That night, I learned a terrible lesson, one no child should ever have to learn. I learned to swallow my tears. I learned to be invisible. The switch, it hurt my skin, yes, but it was the silence that hardened my heart. As the months passed, I learned to move through the house like a shadow, to anticipate what the masters wanted before they even asked, to disappear when Mr. Harrison was in a bad mood. Martha became my only friend, the only person who treated me like a human being. She was the one who told me about the other children who had passed through there. "Some run away," she said one night, as we ate our last meal of the day. "But most have nowhere to go, and the ones who run, when they're caught." She didn't finish the sentence, but the look she gave me said everything. One night, almost a year after my arrival, Martha called me into a dark corner of the kitchen. "I have something to tell you," she whispered, "but you have to swear you won't say anything." I promised to keep the secret, and she continued. "Your sister, Abigail, she works at Mr. Thompson's house, who is our master's brother." My heart sped up. "You saw her? Is she okay?" Martha bit her lip. "I saw her when I went to deliver a package there. She's alive, but I can't say she's okay. That house is no good place for a young woman." I wanted to ask more, to beg her to take me there, but Martha put a finger to my lips. We can't do anything now, but one day, who knows? The hope of one day seeing Abigail again was like a small flame that kept me alive. On the hardest days, when the work seemed endless, or when the scoldings and beatings became unbearable, I clung to that hope. But the reality of the farm remained harsh and relentless. Over time, my fingers became calloused from so much scrubbing. My hands cracked from being in the water with lye soap so much. My body, which was a child's when I arrived, began to change, and that brought new dangers. I noticed that Mr. Harrison's gaze on me was different. It was no longer just the annoyed look of a master at a clumsy servant. It was something else, something that made me want to hide whenever he was near. Martha noticed too. "Don't be alone with him," she warned me once after catching the master watching me as I swept the porch. "And if he calls you to his study at night, tell him you're sick, that you have a fever, anything." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I sensed it was something serious. Fear became my constant companion. Fear of Mr. Harrison, fear of Mrs. Harrison, fear of never seeing Abigail again, fear of spending the rest of my life on that farm. Time passed slowly, marked by the seasons. The harvest season, when the work doubled. The rainy season, when the leaks in the kitchen roof wouldn't let us sleep. The holiday season, when the house filled with guests and we had to work day and night to keep up. Time passed in a slow, brutal blur. My 12th birthday came and went, unnoticed by anyone but me. Then my 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. Each season of planting and harvesting blurred into the next, marked only by how my hands grew rougher and my back ached more. You might be wondering, "Grace, 6 whole years. What happened?" My dears, when you live in fear, time doesn't pass, it just stretches. Those 6 years were one long, held breath. Same work, same fear, every single day. Truthfully, maybe my mind blurred those years for a reason. To protect me. My body, no longer a child's, began to draw the kind of attention that Martha had warned me about. Mr. Harrison's stares lingered longer. His accidental brushes against me in the hallways became more frequent. The fear I lived with every day sharpened into a constant, cold dread. Then, at a large holiday party, a little before my 17th birthday, something happened that would change everything. The farm was full of landowners and their wives, all dressed in their best clothes. Me and 2 other girls, Bella and Clara, served drinks and appetizers, trying to be invisible as we had been taught. That's when I saw a familiar face among the guests. It was Mr. Thompson, the same man who had taken Abigail. My heart leaped. If he was here, could it be? And then I saw her, entering the hall right behind him, carrying a tray of sweets. It was Abigail, but she was no longer the girl I remembered. She was nearly 20 now, but she looked much older. Her face had lost its childhood softness. Her eyes seemed dull, lifeless. When our eyes met, I saw a flash of recognition followed by an almost imperceptible gesture, a small shake of her head, as if to say, "Don't show you know me." I obeyed, continuing my work as if nothing had happened. But inside, my heart was beating so fast, I thought everyone could hear it. My sister was alive. She was right there, just a few feet away from me. Later, when everyone was busy with dinner, I managed to bump into her in the hallway. "Meet me on the back porch after everyone is asleep," I whispered quickly before continuing on my way, as if nothing had happened. That night, as I waited for everyone to retire, I made plans. Maybe we could run away together, find our older brothers, start a life far away from here. The simple idea of being with Abigail again gave me a courage I didn't know I had. Little did I know that this long-awaited reunion would change my destiny in ways I could never imagine. The house finally fell silent around midnight. The guests, drunk on wine and rich food, retired to their rooms. The masters, tired of socializing, also withdrew. In the kitchen, Martha and the other servants finished putting away the last dishes and pots. "I'm going to get some air outside," I whispered to Martha. "I can't sleep in this heat." She gave me a suspicious look but nodded. "Don't be long, and watch out for the dogs." With my heart pounding, I walked through the shadows to the back porch. The full moon lit up the yard, casting long shadows from the trees onto the dirt ground. I waited, huddled in a dark corner, counting the seconds and fearing that Abigail wouldn't be able to come. After what felt like an eternity, I heard light footsteps approaching. A slender figure appeared on the porch, looking all around before whispering, "Grace, are you there?" I stepped out of the shadows, and in an instant, we were hugging. Abigail's body was so thin, I could feel her bones through her thin dress. She smelled of expensive perfume, a smell that didn't match the sister I knew. "Abigail, I thought I'd never see you again," I said, my voice thick with tears I was trying to hold back. She pulled away slightly, holding my shoulders. In the moonlight, I could see her face more clearly. There was something different about her, besides the thinness and the older appearance. Her eyes, once so full of life, now seemed distant, as if part of her was somewhere else. "We don't have much time," she said, looking nervously over her shoulder. "If they find out we're talking." "What happened to you?" I asked, unable to contain the question that was consuming me. "Why did I never see you again? Why wouldn't they let me visit?" Abigail looked down. "Grace, things aren't like Dad said they would be. I'm not a maid. She hesitated, searching for the words. "I'm Mr. Thompson's property, just like your Mr. Harrison's." Now, at nearly 17, I understood exactly what she meant. Martha's warnings, Mr. Harrison's stares, the heavy, sickening feeling I got when he was near. It all clicked into place with terrifying clarity. "In the beginning, it was just housework," Abigail continued, her voice barely a whisper. "But then, when I turned 13, her voice broke, and she couldn't go on. We stood in silence for a moment, just holding each other's hands, like we used to when we were little and scared during thunderstorms. "We have to run away from here," I finally said, squeezing her hands. "Together, we can find David or Mary or—" "It's not that simple," Abigail interrupted, with a bitterness that didn't match her age. "I tried to run away once. They caught me before I even reached the main road." She turned her face, and in the moonlight, I saw a thin scar running from her ear to her chin. That was my punishment for trying to be ungrateful, as he put it. When I saw that scar, dear Lord, my heart just shattered. That wasn't a mark of ingratitude. It was the mark of a crime. In that one moment, my dears, all the fear inside me, it turned to anger, a hot, quiet anger. I knew. I couldn't just run for myself. I had to get her out too. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "But we can't stay here forever. Mr. Harrison, he looks at me in a way." "I know," Abigail said, and I saw tears shining in her eyes. "That's why we have to be smart. We can't just run. We need a plan," I agreed, feeling a mixture of fear and determination growing inside me. "What kind of plan?" Abigail looked around once more, making sure we were alone. "There's a young man who works on Mr. Thompson's land, Jesse. He's been good to me. He brings me food when I'm being punished. He warns me when the boss is in a bad mood. He said he knows people in Indianapolis who can help us." "Indianapolis? That's so far. But it's our best chance. A big city where we can disappear. And David is there, remember? If we can just get to him." The mention of our older brother's name brought a pang of hope. David had always been the strong one, the protector. If we were with him, we would be safe. "How would we do it?" I asked, already imagining the journey. "In a month? It's the 4th of July. The bosses are going to the city, to the mayor's house. They only take a few servants. I've already offered to go. You need to do the same. If we're in the city, it will be easier to escape." The plan seemed dangerous, almost impossible, but the alternative, staying on the farm, waiting for Mr. Harrison to finally do what I feared was unthinkable. "I'll try," I promised. "But what if they don't choose me to go?" "Then we'll try something else," Abigail replied, with a determination that reminded me of Mom. "But I'm not leaving you here, Grace. Not after finally finding you." We heard a noise from the house and quickly separated. "I have to go back," Abigail whispered. "If Mrs. Thompson notices I left the room." We hugged one last time, tight, as if trying to absorb each other's presence for the lonely days to come. "1 month," she murmured in my ear. "Hold on for 1 more month." And then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows as silently as she had arrived. I stood there for a few more minutes, feeling the night breeze dry the tears on my face. 1 month seemed both so close and so far away. I walked back to the kitchen on light feet, praying that Martha had already gone to bed. But she was there, sitting at the table with a lit candle illuminating her tired face. "You found her, didn't you?" she asked, without preamble. I thought about denying it, but her gaze told me it would be useless. I nodded. "I suspected it when I saw Mr. Thompson's girl, the way you two looked at each other. There was something familiar." She sighed deeply. "You're planning to run away." It wasn't a question, but I confirmed it anyway. "We have to get out of here, Martha. You know what will happen if I stay." She reached out and touched my face gently. "I know, child. I know all too well." Her eyes, usually so strong, looked sad now. "I've seen this story so many times. Are you going to tell them?" I asked, fearing the answer. Martha shook her head. "No, but I need you to understand the danger, if you're caught." She didn't complete the sentence, but she didn't need to. The image of the scar on Abigail's face was vivid in my mind. "We don't have a choice," I said, with a conviction that surprised me. "I'd rather die trying than live like this." The words, so harsh, coming from such a young girl, made Martha lower her head. When she looked up again, there was a resolution in her eyes. "I'll help you." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small, worn wooden cross, pressing it into my hand. "I've seen too many girls broken by this place. But not you, child. You've got your mother's light in your eyes. Don't let him put it out. We're getting you out of here, one way or another." That small, worn cross became my anchor. It wasn't just a plan to escape. It was a promise that goodness still existed, even in that dark place. The following weeks, I lived in a constant state of nervousness. Every time Mr. Harrison entered the kitchen, I trembled. Every time Mrs. Harrison called for me, I feared she had somehow discovered our plans. To my despair, as the 4th of July celebration approached, Mr. Harrison's stares became more insistent, more threatening. One night, he called me to his study to serve whiskey. As I filled his glass, I felt his hand touch my leg. I dropped the bottle in shock, and the whiskey spilled on his pants. The slap came quickly, catching me by surprise. "You clumsy oaf!" he roared. "This is coming out of your hide." I cowered in the corner, waiting for the beating, but he just stood up, wiping his wet pants. "Tomorrow," he said, in a voice that made my blood run cold. "Tomorrow night, you're coming back here, and you're going to clean this mess up properly. Understand?" I can still hear his voice. I knew what "clean it up" meant. Oh no, it wasn't about the spilled whiskey. That was the moment Martha warned me about. The moment I'd been holding my breath, running from, for 6 long years. My time was up. The plan with Abigail, gone. I had to leave. That night, I ran out as soon as he dismissed me and fled to the kitchen, where I threw up my entire dinner. Martha found me like that, trembling and pale. "What happened?" she asked, helping me up. Between sobs, I told her what had happened. "Tomorrow night," Martha repeated, her face grim. "This isn't good, Grace. Not good at all." "What do I do?" I asked desperately. Martha was silent for a long moment, as if making a difficult decision. "You're running away tonight." "But Abigail." "The plan." "There's no more time for the plan," she cut me off. "I'll help you get to the city. From there, you can send a message to your sister, but you can't wait any longer." That night, while everyone slept, Martha gave me a small bundle. "There's food for 2 days and a little money I saved. It's not much, but it should help." "Come with me," I begged, holding her calloused hands. "You don't deserve to stay here either." She smiled, a sad smile that carried the weight of many years of suffering. "My running days are over, child, but yours are just beginning." With tears in my eyes, I hugged the woman who had been more of a mother to me in recent years than anyone else. "I'll never forget you," I promised. "Me neither. Now go, before someone wakes up." I left through the back door of the kitchen, carrying only Martha's small bundle and the hope of a better life. The night was dark, with no moon, which was good for hiding but bad for finding the way. Following Martha's instructions, I kept the main road at a distance, walking through the brush, guided only by the stars and the faith that God was watching over me. Every sound made me jump: the hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of a dog. I imagined the boss's men on my trail, the dogs sniffing my scent, but I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, quietly repeating my siblings' names like a mantra of hope. At the first light of morning, I reached the bank of a river, the same Ohio River that flowed past my hometown, now my escape route. There, exhausted and with my feet bleeding, I had to make a decision: follow the bank, risking being seen, or try to cross, risking drowning. That's when I heard the barking of dogs in the distance. The barking grew louder every second. I looked at the river, its dark and swirling waters, and felt fear paralyze me. I was never a good swimmer. The few times I had been in the Ohio River, it had been holding hands with Abigail or David in shallow, calm stretches. This was different, deep and with a strong current. "God help me," I murmured as the barking closed in. It was then I spotted, a few yards downstream, a small canoe tied to a fallen log. It looked old and battered, but it was my only chance. I ran to it, ignoring the thorns that scratched my bare legs and the pebbles that bruised my bare feet. The canoe had a small leak, but it was still floating. With trembling hands, I untied the rope holding it to the log. There was no oar, just a piece of wood that might serve to steer the vessel. I got into the canoe, which rocked dangerously, threatening to tip over. I grabbed the sides tightly, waiting for the rocking to stop. Then I used the piece of wood to push the canoe away from the bank. The current quickly caught me, carrying me downstream much faster than I expected. I looked back and saw 3 men with dogs on the bank I had just left. One of them pointed in my direction, shouting something the wind carried away. I saw one of the men enter the water as if to swim after me, but another pulled him back, shouting and gesturing. The canoe spun and bobbed in the current. All I could do was cling to the edges and pray. Water was coming in through the small hole in the bottom, soaking my skirt. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden light on the river, making everything frighteningly visible. I can't say how long I stayed like that, at the mercy of the waters. Minutes or hours, it was impossible to tell. The fear and exhaustion were starting to take their toll, and I felt my eyes grow heavy, even in the dangerous situation. It was a violent jolt that woke me. The canoe had hit a rock and was now spinning uncontrollably. In the distance, I heard the sound that riverfolk dreaded most: the roar of rapids. The Ohio River, usually so gentle, had its treacherous stretches, and I was being dragged into one of them. "Help me, Holy Mary," I cried as the canoe began to pick up speed, heading down the rapids. Water splashed everywhere, drenching me completely. A particularly hard impact nearly threw me from the canoe. I held on with all my strength, my knuckles white with tension. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the rapids ended. The canoe slid into calmer waters, but the relief was short-lived. The impact on the rocks had widened the hole, and water was pouring in faster. The canoe was beginning to sink. I looked around, desperate. The right bank looked impassable, with steep cliffs and dense vegetation. But on the left, I saw a small sandy beach, followed by flatter land. Using the piece of wood as a makeshift oar, I tried to steer the canoe toward it, but it was too heavy with the water it was taking on. When the water inside the canoe reached my knees, I made a decision. Clutching Martha's bundle to my chest, I jumped into the water. The shock of the cold water took my breath away, and for a moment, I sank, swallowing river water. When I surfaced, coughing and gasping, the current was already carrying me away from the bank. I tried to swim, moving my arms as I had seen my brothers do, but the weight of my wet clothes and the bundle pulled me down. The bank seemed further and further away, and exhaustion was beginning to win. I won't die like this, I thought. Not after everything I've been through. With one last effort, I let go of the bundle, sacrificing the food and money for the chance to live, and swam with all the strength I had left. The bank approached slowly, each stroke a small victory against death. When my feet finally touched the bottom, I could hardly believe it. I dragged myself onto the small, sandy beach, collapsing to my knees as soon as I was out of the water. I stayed there, coughing, shivering, and crying with relief. But I couldn't rest for long. The boss's men could be anywhere, and I was alone, soaked, with no food and no money. I got up with effort and started walking, following the course of the river. The sun was high in the sky when I spotted what looked like a small village. From a distance, I could see a few simple houses, similar to my childhood home in Vevey, and a larger building that looked like a church or a general store. I hesitated. What if someone here worked for the boss? What if they turned me in? Hunger and exhaustion, however, spoke louder. I needed help, or I wouldn't survive much longer. I approached cautiously, trying to look as inconspicuous as possible, which was difficult considering my wet clothes and disheveled appearance. The first people I saw were some women hanging laundry on makeshift clotheslines. When they saw me, they stopped what they were doing, staring at me in amazement. "Good morning," I said, my voice trembling. "Sorry, I got lost." One of the women, older than the others, approached me. She had gray hair pulled back in a bun and calloused hands like Martha's. "Lost is an understatement, child," she said, looking at my soaked clothes and the scratches on my arms and legs. "You look like you escaped from hell." I didn't answer. I didn't know how much I could tell, how much was safe to reveal. "You're trembling," she continued. "Come, let's go inside. My name is Betty." I followed her to a simple but clean and organized little house. Inside, the smell of coffee and cornbread reminded me that I hadn't eaten anything since the night before. My stomach rumbled loudly, and Betty smiled. "Sit down," she said, pointing to a wooden stool near the table. "I'll get you something to eat and some dry clothes." As she moved around the house, I looked around, searching for signs of danger. I saw only the typical objects of a simple home: clay pots, straw baskets, a few images of saints on the wall. Betty returned with a change of clothes and a piece of towel. "Change behind that screen," she said, pointing to a corner of the room. "Then come eat." The clothes were big for me, probably belonging to an older daughter, but they were clean and dry. When I returned, Betty had already put a plate of grits, a piece of bacon, and a mug of coffee with milk on the table. I sat down and began to eat, trying not to show how starved I was, but without much success. "Slowly," Betty advised, "or you'll get sick." When I was finally full, I looked at the woman who had welcomed me with such kindness. "Ma'am, could you help me get to Indianapolis?" Betty frowned. "Indianapolis? That's a long way from here. What does a girl like you want to do so far away?" I lowered my eyes. "My brother lives there. I need to find him." "And your parents?" I felt the tears return. "My mother died a long time ago. My father—" I couldn't continue. Betty seemed to understand. She placed her hand on mine. "You're running away, aren't you?" I nodded, not having the courage to look at her. "From Mr. Harrison's farm." I looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "You're not the first girl to pass through here in this situation," she replied with a tired sigh. "This village, Street Mary's, is between the boss's land and the city of New Albany. Every now and then, a runaway servant shows up." "Are you going to turn me in?" I asked, already calculating the distance to the door. "No, child. The boss has no power here. This village belongs to the church. Father Olivio doesn't let the boss's men in here." I felt such relief that I almost collapsed in the chair. "Thank God," I murmured. "But it won't be easy to get to Indianapolis," Betty continued. "It's more than a day's journey. You have to take the boat to Louisville, then the bus." Hearing the name of the big city, I felt a pang. "I can't go to Louisville." Betty looked thoughtful. "I understand, but there is another way. You can take the boat from here to Evansville, in Indiana, and from there, the bus to Indianapolis. It's longer, but safer." Self-correction. Using Evansville, in instead of Louisville, KY, to avoid crossing state lines unnecessarily, adapting Pinedo, Alagoas. The mention of money made me remember the bundle lost in the river. "I don't have any money to pay for the ticket," I confessed, ashamed. Betty was silent for a moment, then got up and went to a small chest in the corner of the room. She returned with a cloth pouch. "This should be enough for the tickets and a little food," she said, handing me the pouch that jingled with coins. It was for my youngest daughter Catherine's hope chest, but she was also taken to a farm. She never came back. That poor woman. she gave me the money she'd saved for her own lost daughter. You see, the world isn't just full of monsters like Harrison. It has saints too, like Betty. She didn't just give me money. She gave me back my faith in people. And that promise I made her, someday, help another girl. Well, that became my life's purpose. I looked at the pouch, then at Betty, speechless with gratitude. Just promise me one thing, she continued, holding my hands. When you get to Indianapolis, get help. Don't stay on the streets alone. And one day, when you can, help another girl who needs it, just as I'm helping you now. I promised, my eyes filled with tears. I'm going to find my brother David, and then I'm coming back for my sister Abigail. She's also trapped on the boss's brother's farm. Betty smiled, a sad smile that spoke of many losses. You have courage, child. You're going to need it. That same afternoon, Betty took me to the village's small dock. A fishing boat was preparing to leave downriver towards Evansville. Carl, Betty called, waving to the man arranging nets on the boat. I have a passenger for you. Carl, a middle-aged man with skin weathered by sun and salt, looked at me curiously. She's the niece of a friend of mine from Evansville, Betty explained with a naturalness that surprised me. She's heading home after visiting me. This isn't a passenger boat, Carl grumbled. But for you, Miss Betty, I'll make an exception. Betty hugged me tightly before I got on the boat. May God protect you, child. Thank you for everything, I whispered. I'll never forget you. The boat departed with the current, leaving behind the small village that had been my refuge. I sat among the fishing nets, watching the riverbanks that had witnessed my desperate escape. The trip to Evansville took almost a full day. Carl didn't ask many questions, just offered me water and some dried fish. When we finally arrived, it was already getting dark. The Evansville bus terminal was much bigger and busier than the village dock. Buses of all sizes arrived and departed, loaded with goods and people. Carl showed me where the bus station was. There's a bus to Indianapolis early tomorrow, he said. Be careful out there, girl. I spent the night in the bus station, huddled in a corner, afraid to close my eyes and wake up back at the farm. When the first bus to Indianapolis was announced, I bought my ticket and boarded, still unable to believe I was really escaping. The journey was long, on bumpy roads that made the bus rock like a canoe in turbulent waters. But every mile took me further from Mr. Harrison and closer to freedom, and maybe to David. Indianapolis appeared on the horizon like a mirage. I had never seen such a big city. Buildings that seemed to touch the sky, wide streets full of cars, people rushing everywhere. When I got off the bus, I just stood there, not knowing where to go. Miss, you lost? Asked a street kid selling candy near the station. I'm looking for my brother, I replied. David Miller. He works in construction. The boy made a face. There's a lot of construction in Indianapolis. Do you know which one? I didn't. The last news we had received from David was years ago, when he sent word that he was working on a site in Indianapolis. Where exactly nobody knew. Maybe at the city market you'll find someone who knows him, the boy suggested. There are people from all over there. I followed his suggestion and arrived at the Indianapolis City Market. It was an explosion of colors, sounds, and smells that stunned me. Stalls sold everything. Fruits, vegetables, meats, clothes, handicrafts, herbs. Vendors shouted, announcing their products. Customers haggled. Children ran between the stalls. I spent the entire day walking through the market, asking every vendor if they knew David Miller. Most just shook their heads. Some asked questions I couldn't answer. When the market started to close, I realized I was back at square one. With the money I had left, I bought some food and found a cheap boarding house near the bus station. The owner, a lady named Donna, looked at me suspiciously when I asked for a room. Where are your parents, girl? I'm looking for my brother, I replied, repeating the story I had rehearsed. He works in construction here in Indianapolis. I came from downstate to stay with him. Donna didn't seem convinced, but she accepted the money I offered. Just for one night, she said. Tomorrow, you need to find your brother. The room was small and simple, but clean. I lay on the bed, exhausted, but unable to sleep. Freedom, so long dreamed of, now came with a new fear. The fear of not finding David, of being alone in a big, unknown city. The next day, after a simple breakfast offered by Donna, I went out again in search of my brother. This time, I followed the advice of one of the boarding house guests and went to the construction workers' union hall. The union building was simple, with a faded sign at the entrance. Inside, a few men were talking in low voices. I timidly approached the counter, where a man with glasses was organizing papers. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm looking for my brother, David Miller. He works in construction here in Indianapolis." The man looked at me over his glasses. "David Miller. I don't recall that name, but we have a register of members. Let me check." As he consulted a large ledger, my heart pounded. This was my last hope. "We don't have any David Miller registered," the man finally said. "Are you sure he works in construction?" I felt the floor disappear from under me. "Yes, I am. At least that's what he was doing when he left home." "And when was that?" "About 5 years ago." The man sighed. "A lot can change in 5 years, girl. He could be in another city, another state even." When that man said David wasn't there, my last bit of hope just crumbled. And I know you're wondering, did you ever find David? No, my dears, we never did. Even later, we looked. Oh, we looked so hard. But life, sometimes it just swallows people up. I just pray he found his peace, wherever he ended up. I left the union hall devastated. No David, no money, nowhere to stay. What would I do now? I was walking aimlessly through the city when I heard someone call my name. "Grace!" I turned around, startled, fearing I'd see one of the boss's men. But the person walking towards me was a woman I didn't immediately recognize. "Grace, is that really you?" When she got closer, I almost fell over in surprise. It was Mary, my older sister, who had left home to get married years ago. She looked different, with shorter hair, city clothes, but it was her, without a doubt. "Mary!" I exclaimed, running to hug her. How did you find me?" She hugged me tightly, then held my face in her hands, as if to confirm it was really me. "I didn't find you. It was chance, or God, I don't know. I'm here buying fabric to make curtains. But what are you doing here, and all alone?" The tears I had held back for so long finally came. Between sobs, I told Mary everything. Mom's death, Dad selling me to the boss, the years on the farm, the escape down the river, Betty's help, the search for David. Mary listened to it all in silence, her face changing from surprise to horror, and finally, to fury. When I finished, she hugged me again, so tightly I could barely breathe. "My little sister," she said, her voice choked. "I went through so many hard times that I didn't go back to check on you all. I thought you were okay with Dad. If I had known." "It's not your fault," I said, wiping my tears. "You didn't know." Mary held my hands. "You're coming to live with me now, with Paul, my husband, and our children. We have a small house, but there's room for you." "But what about Abigail?" I asked. "She's still on Mr. Thompson's farm. I have to get her out of there." Mary frowned. "One thing at a time, Grace. First, you need to recover, get strong. Then we'll think about how to help Abigail." And just like that, in the span of one day, my life changed completely once again. From a lost and desperate girl, I now had a home, a family. Mary and Paul welcomed me with open arms into their home, in a simple neighborhood of Indianapolis. In the months that followed, I adapted to life in the city. Mary insisted I go back to school, and I started attending a school near the house. It was hard at first. I was far behind the other kids my age, but I studied hard, determined to make up for lost time. At night, however, the nightmares came. I dreamed of Mr. Harrison chasing me, of the river water swallowing me, of Abigail trapped and crying for help. I would wake up screaming, soaked in sweat, and Mary would come to calm me down. "It will pass," she'd say, stroking my hair like Mom used to. "In time, it will pass." But time passed, and my worry for Abigail only grew. I had to save her, as I had saved myself. I had to keep the promise we made that night on the farm porch. That's when Peter, our studious brother, showed up for a visit. He was finishing law school in Chicago and had come to spend the holidays in Indianapolis. When he heard my story, and Abigail's, his usually calm face transformed. "This is a crime, Grace. What they did to you. what they're doing to Abigail. It's slave labor. It's abuse. It's human trafficking. We have to report this. Report it? I asked, not understanding. To whom? The police obey the bosses. Not everywhere, Peter replied. There are federal authorities who investigate these types of crimes, lawyers who aren't afraid of the bosses, journalists who can expose this. And so, with Peter's help, we began to plan not just Abigail's rescue, but the end of Mr. Harrison and Mr. Thompson's reign of terror. Today, when I look out the window of my little house in Madison and see the sun rising, I thank God for every day. Life taught me that even in the darkest nights, the dawn always comes. The complaint Peter filed against the bosses took time to have an effect. They had powerful friends, but eventually, justice arrived. I had to relive everything in court. Mr. Harrison's lawyer tried to paint me as a liar, a troubled girl. But I faced Mr. Harrison's gaze, the one that had terrified me for 7 years, and I told the truth. I spoke of the $500. I spoke of the switch. I spoke of the threat he made in his study. For the first time, he was the one who couldn't meet my eyes. At that moment, I knew I had taken my story back. I wasn't alone. Mary, Paul, and Peter stood by my side. The hardest part was rescuing Abigail. When we got the court order to retrieve her, we discovered she was no longer on the farm. She had been sold again, and nobody knew, or pretended not to know, where. Those were agonizing months. Authorities searched farms in several states. We put ads in newspapers, distributed photos, visited hospitals, and even prisons. When we finally found her on a remote farm just across the state line in Illinois, she was unrecognizable, thin, with a lost gaze, her body covered in scars. I wasn't ready for that. I thought I'd feel joy, relief. But all I felt was this cold, empty ache. That wasn't my Abigail. It was a shell. They had ruined her. My dears, getting her out was the easy part. Healing her, that took a lifetime. Abigail had been sold several times, passed from one boss to another like merchandise. Her recovery was slow. She spent years in treatment, dealing with the trauma. There were days when I thought we would never see the cheerful Abigail I knew from childhood again. But humans have an incredible capacity for healing when they receive love. Over time, Abigail found her way. She moved to a convent in South Bend, where the nuns welcomed her. There, she found peace working in the garden. Today, at 75, she still lives there, serene in her simplicity. As for me, I finished my studies and got a degree in social work. I wanted to help other girls who, like me and Abigail, had been victims of exploitation. I worked for over 30 years at the Department of Social Services in Indianapolis, handling cases of at-risk children. Every child I managed to save was a way of healing my own wounds. I saw terrible things, situations that strongly resembled what I lived through. But I also saw miracles happen when people united to protect the most vulnerable. It was through my work that I met Patrick, a detective specializing in crimes against children. We met during an operation to rescue girls from an exploitation ring, and something connected us immediately. We got married when I was 32, late by the standards of the time, but it was the time I needed to feel ready. Patrick taught me that not all men are like my father or Mr. Harrison, that genuine goodness exists in this world. Patrick was my blessing. He taught me how to trust again. But I know, some of you are still thinking about my father. What happened to him? Sighs. We never found out. After he sold me, he just vanished. I used to be angry. But you see, healing isn't about them. It's about us. My wonderful life with Patrick, my children, that was my victory. We had 2 children, Robert, now a doctor up in Fort Wayne, and Daniel, who works in human rights in Washington, D.C. They are my greatest prides, along with my 3 grandchildren, Claire, Miles, and little Anna. When we retired, Patrick and I decided to leave Indianapolis and move to Madison. We wanted tranquility, proximity to nature, a place to heal the last wounds we still carried. We lived together for over 40 years. Patrick passed away 3 years ago, from a sudden heart attack. It was quick. He was in the yard when he fell. He didn't suffer, and for that, I am grateful. Now I live alone, But I never feel lonely. My children visit me regularly. My grandchildren spend their holidays with me. My neighbors Nancy and Sharon are companions for coffee and conversation. What fulfills me most today is being able to share my story. For years, I kept everything hidden, ashamed and afraid, but I realized that silence only protects the abusers. Every time I tell what I lived through, I feel like I'm extending a hand to someone who might be going through something similar right now. I volunteer at a support center for victims of violence here in Madison. The women and children who arrive there, with the same frightened eyes I once had, recognize me as an equal. When I say, I survived and you will survive too, they believe me because they know I've been through what they're going through. When I look back at the scared little girl I once was, fleeing down the Ohio River, I feel pain and pride at the same time. Pain for what I went through, for what Abigail and so many others suffered. Pride for having survived, for having used my experience to help others. Life didn't just give me scars, it gave me purpose. Every challenge I faced prepared me to extend a hand to those in need. Every tear I shed taught me to wipe away the tears of others with more compassion. If there's one thing I've learned, my dears, it's that our story doesn't end with our traumas. They are painful chapters, yes, but they are not the whole book. What we do afterward, how we choose to keep living, is what really matters. And so I go on living life, one day at a time, grateful for each dawn, for each hug from my grandchildren, for every opportunity to transform pain into healing, not just for me, but for others who cross my path. My dears, that scared little girl on the riverbank, the one clutching a piece of wood, thought her life was over. She was cold, alone, and adrift in the dark. But I am living proof that the darkness does not win, not unless you let it. What I learned is that our scars do not define us. They show us where we have been, but not where we are going. My journey taught me that we are not just meant to survive our pain, we are meant to transform it. We can become the light for others that we so desperately needed ourselves. Martha was my light. Betty was my light. Now, I try to be that light for others. If this story has touched your heart, I ask you, please, to press that like button and subscribe to join our family. Every time you do, you tell me that my voice matters, and it gives me the strength to keep sharing. And before you go, to show that you have stood with me until the very end, please leave the word light in the comments below. Let's fill this space with so much light that it chases away all the shadows for anyone who might be feeling lost tonight. Thank you for listening. May God bless you, and remember, always look for the light.